The west coast town of Darling nestles between rolling hills of vineyards and golden wheat fields and is a meeting place for the old and the new. In a region such as this, the wine industry is a popular tourism drawcard, and institutions like the Kloof Winery play a major role in sustaining the area, along with agriculture and cattle and sheep farming. Darling is home to actors and writers, retired captains of industry, and those looking for a little peace and serenity, where lovingly restored Victorian homes live side by side with modern houses and bungalows.
Everything about Darling reminds one of a rich heritage, but once a year the tranquil aura of the West Coast is shaken up by the off-road racing fraternity. The ABSA Off-Road Championship is made up of 8 events throughout South Africa and Botswana, and in recent years Darling has hosted the opening round of the series. This year the event was provided with an additional Cape flavour with sponsorship from Adenco, a Cape Town-based electrical construction company. The Adenco 400 drew over 50 entries from throughout South Africa, and as is always the case at the start of a new season, there was an air of anticipation throughout the well-organised and laid-out pit area.
New seasons invariably bring new rules, and on this score, reigning South African champion Duncan Vos was in a philosophical frame of mind.
The rules have changed. We've got bigger restrictors in the cars to slow the cars down. We've done a bit of testing with the vehicles in the new format, and it's definitely affected them, so we'll have to see how it's going to go.
New seasons also mean new faces, with race and rally driver Hein Lateghan a late addition to the factory Castrol Toyota team.
This is such a big opportunity for me. I've got a friend and he phoned me yesterday and said that he thinks it happens just 20 years too late, but I mean, I'm still very grateful for it. I think I appreciate it more than probably a lot of youngsters. We had a long career in motorsport, from the track to rallying, and this is a big opportunity for me.
New seasons also have a habit of upsetting the best laid plans, as Harry Smith-based privateer Kobus van Tonder could testify.
Unfortunately, at the very last moment, we've decided to bring the car from last year. We've done a lot of testing, but we're not 100% happy with our mapping on the new car, and we prefer to have it 100% before we introduce it into a race. And we've decided to race last year's car for this event. Next event, the other car will be in place.
Another newcomer to the off-road scene was circuit racing and kart star LEEROY POULTER, who was facing a baptism of fire.
Yeah, I must say, you know, we've been at BAPHUMZE as well. We tested there, and I'm really enjoying it. Actually, it's good fun, and I actually just can't wait to get into something faster.
New seasons also welcome back old faces, and KwaZulu-Natal driver BAPHUMZE RUBULUZA falls into this category.
Yes, it's been 2 years and we've been working on this project, Class E 3-litre diesel. So we're here now, and we're happy to be here because this is where we started all our off-road racing. So this is always a memorable place for us. I suppose we've learned a few things now, and so getting on to be pitched with guys like LEEROY and all the guys that are here is what we're looking for. We definitely set this year for us to compete.
The first of the production vehicles to start the 66-kilometre Friday prologue to determine start positions for Saturday's race proper were Duncan Vos and Ralph Pitchford in the factory Donaldson Nissan Navara. They were followed by Castrol Toyota Hilux stalwarts Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton, and the Unifreight Ford Ranger of Kobus van Tonder and Rian Guapa.
Organisers of ABSA off-road events this year have been asked to come up with more technical routes that slash average speeds. The Cape Peninsula Motorcycle and Car Club, organisers of the Adenco 400, did just that, and the crews found it hard going, with Duncan Vos and Rolf Pitchford setting the fastest time of 1 hour, 3 minutes and 16 seconds. Only 14 seconds behind them were Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore, with Norwegian Ivar Tollefsen and Britain Quinn Evans giving the Donaldson Nissan team a clean sweep of the first 3 cars.
Toyota Toyota Hilux privateers Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst upstaged the factory team by taking 4th place on the prologue, but were almost 3 minutes slower than Voss and Pitchford. The factory Castor Toyota pair of Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton decided on a cautious approach aimed at conserving the vehicle and were 6 minutes off the pace.
For Terence Marsh and Pieter Groenewald in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara, it was a learning curve, with the pair having their first outing in a production car.
The RFS Toyota Hilux pair of Chris de Ploo and Ewald van Rensburg were going along steadily but were 9 minutes off the pace. Right behind them were de Plooi's son Chris Jr. and Henk van Vieren, who were also having their first outing in an SP class vehicle. The Roercon pair of Pieter Ruthven and Deval Boshoff were also making their first SP class appearance in one of the ex-factory Ford Rangers and were being chased by George and Sharon Barkhuizen in the AIM Toyota Hilux.
With brother Jaco competing in the ABSA Epic Cycle event, Dan Swanepoel was pressed into service with Keith Solomon in the IDM Cement Toyota Hilux. Late in the prologue, the pair managed to gently roll the Toyota, and Kobus van Tonder and Rian Guelper were in the wars when they beached the Unifreight Ford Ranger and could not get going again because of a faulty starter motor.
The fastest time in Class D went to Cliff and Louis Weichelt in the N1 4x4 Toyota Hilux D4D. Cliff was Class D champion in 2007 and is reunited in the car this year with son Louis, who only competed in 2 events last year as a stand-in for Ralph Pitchford in the Nissan factory team. Second in Class D were 2008 Rookies of the Year, Dewald van Breda and Johan de Tooy in the Northam Toyota Hilux, who have moved up from Class E.
First in Class E in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux were Dion Fenter and Ian Palmer, winner of the Limpopo 400 last year, who set a cracking pace. In an impressive debut, Leroy Poulter, partnered by engineering wizard Rob Howie, was second in class in the Ferodo Nissan Hardbody, with Pikkie Labuskaghni and Rikus Erasmus third in another 4x4 Mega World entry. Behind them were Louw de Bruin and Rian Greyling, having their first outing in the ex-Jack Peckham Ford Ranger, now in Roercon racing colours.
Reigning special vehicle champions Cully and Quinton Sulwald were back in harness and raring to go.
Look, we start from scratch again this year. We were fortunate to finish first last year, but this year's a complete new ball game. We all start at the bottom again. We'll try for a back-to-back, but it's so early in the season. I mean, obviously you don't know what's going to happen with the rest of the cars.
Former South African champion Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau just missed out on last year's championship, and Shamir had an interesting viewpoint on the subject of racing drivers.
You know, we always, racing drivers, we always say we're going to be consistent, but you know, when we put that helmet on, there's a switch that goes loose here. So we'll have to see. I think, yeah, the guys that are going to play it consistent will definitely have a good chance for the championship this year.
For Class B champions Johan and Etienne Besaidnout out in the Adenco back, the pressure was on right from the very start.
Ja, nee, pressure is aan. Begin van die jaar, nuwe seisoen, Adenco 400, eerste event van die jaar. Ons hoop en vertrou het gaan goed gaan met ons. Strategie is om so veel as moontlik punte aan te teken. So hoop alles van die beste.
First car on the road in the special vehicle prologue were reigning champions Cully and Quinton Sulwood in the Sulwood Racing Bat. The Sulwoods had a clean run, but the fastest time was set by the Century Racing pair of Colin Matthews and Alan Smith, who were later hit with a 30-minute penalty for deviating from the route. That put the Sulwoods on top of the leaderboard, closely followed by impressive newcomers Jimmy Zaus and Stefan Coetzee in the ex-Gary Berthold Atlas Copco Porter.
Out for the first time in the new Motorite Revo 1 4x4, former champions Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman had a few navigation problems. Hot on their heels were Variawa and Rousseau in the total porter, with Naheem Musaji and Mohammed Molston hoping to avoid a repeat of last year's event when a huge accident in the tyre rack Gymco put them out of action for most of the season.
Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carson had a consistent 2008 season and were going along steadily in the Regent Racing bat. The father and son combination of Nick and Ryan Harper were also going well in the Atlas Copco bat, but the route was turning out to be tougher and rougher than was expected. Veterans Nardis Alberts and Adri Roots were nearly 4 minutes off the pace, but were back in action in the Rapsa bat after recovering from back injuries sustained on last year's Limpopo 400.
KwaZulu-Natal crew Don Thompson and Don Blakey were setting a hot pace in Class P in the Zarko. Thompson is a flyer, and his time for the prologue was up there with the Class A cars. The Besaidnout brothers were giving Thompson and Blakey a run for their money in the Adenco bat, with veterans Richard Schilling and Chris Davies chasing the youngsters in the Cultura Ace Co.
Class B pace was being set by Bez Besaidnout, who won his class last year, and son Dion in the Adenco bat. Derek Dutoy and Ian Pinar were having a clean run in one of the early bat models, as were Simon Beckett and Steve Harris, with the Century Racing pair out in another of the early bat models.
Matters weren't going quite as well with Marius Nicholson and Roderick Jeffrey, who were having a few problems with a gate.
Back in the pits at the designated service park, it was going to be a long night for some service crews. Cutler and Andrew Makanete had to be towed back to harbour. It was a tough afternoon for Bapi RUBULUZA and White brothers David and Gary. For others, like Hannes Grobler, all was well with the world.
Yeah, I must say the guys had a big surprise for us in the time trial. It was a real off-road time trial. It was very rough. But, you know, I'm used to do it like that. And they brought the speed down. I think that's what they wanted to do. And I think the big thing on this was to keep your car in one piece, because tomorrow we're going to do the same route. And if the car's tonight in one piece, tomorrow I think it's going to be good for you.
For Rubicon Racing team principal Peter Ruthven, a first outing in one of the X-Works SP Class Ford Rangers was a baptism by fire.
Tough out there today. It's very, very difficult. It's rough. One trench on another. Big ditches. You just can't get up to speed. But it was very nice. Tough.
Evan Hutchinson has plenty of experience, but was also going through a steep learning curve in the new Motorite Revo 4x4.
Well, I'm learning a lot of them still at the moment. You know, I don't really know. I've never raced a four-wheel drive, but yeah, you carry a lot more corner speed. You know, you need to get on the power a little bit earlier to control the front of the car. We don't have as much travel, so I did hit a few things and cased the suspension, which sent us flying a few times. But yeah, I'm slowly learning all the differences. I'll be able to answer that question better after a couple of events.
Corporate guests were able to take in a little refreshment at the Adenco marquee. Others admired a display of street road cars, and for Bez Besaidnout, a founder member of Adenco Construction, it was a proud moment.
The participation of Adenco towards the sponsorship. We're very proud to be involved with the ABSA off-road range, and yeah.
And obviously an event that you'd love to win.
If I would say the contrary, I'll be lying.
And also nice for you now, you've got Dion in the car with you, so now it's a real family affair with the Besaidnouts.
Well, we are now back where we were 5 years ago when all three boys, we all raced together. And yeah, with Dion in the car with me, it's lovely. All the boys are involved.
And Etienne and Johan, they're the champions, but as you said last year, it's a new level playing field this year.
Well, you must remember, they're the younger guys, and they got more muscle at this stage. We're wrong side of 50, so yes.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going the extra mile to get you financed.
Every legend has a story. Every story has a beginning.
Beaten track to find solutions.
The days of a 6 a.m. start for off-road races are long gone. Nowadays, races start at a more civilized hour, but pre-race tension remains. And after a troubled prologue, Hein Lautergang was hoping for a better day in the Castrol Toyota Hilux.
Yeah, I mean, if I listen to what the guys say, I think it was a real tough stage to get a start. Like after 10 Ks, I thought to myself, this is going to be tough. You know, it was really very rough. But I mean, it was going well. We kept it together, and then unfortunately, we had an engine sensor that died on us, and the bucket came to a halt. The guys from Toyota worked very hard last night to get it fixed, so we're grateful for that. So we can start today with, I think, about a half an hour penalty.
The Atlas Copco pair of newcomers Jimmy Zahus and Stefan Coetzee were prologue surprise packages.
Today, I think we're just going to try to do exactly what we did yesterday, just on the same pace, just maybe 10% off.
Do you think it'll be a bit quicker the route this morning?
Hopefully, I hear it's going to open up. Because the time trial was very rough.
There was an early morning haze around Darling as tension mounted before the start of the Adenco 400. Crews and supporters stood around in little knots as they waited for their start time, with the 3 factory Donaldson Nissan Navaras the first cars to come under starters' orders. First away were South African drivers champion Duncan Vos and Rolf Pitchford, who finished second on the Dakar Rally earlier this year.
There was a large turnout of spectators at the start, with veteran Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore the second car on the road. They were followed by Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans, who finished 4th overall on the Dakar Rally in a Nissan Navara built at Nissan Motorsports workshops in Midrand. Toyota pair Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst completed the top 5 in the production vehicle category, with South African champions Collie and Quinton Silvold the first of the special vehicles.
The prospect in store for crews was 2 tough loops of approximately 160 kilometers that included the route for the prologue. Right behind the Sulvolts in the Sulvolt Racing Bat were Zahus and Coetzee in the Atlas Copco Porter, with Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman, Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau, and Naeem Musaji and Mohammed Mulston following in quick succession.
Duncan Vos and Ralph Pitchford were soon into their stride, and being first on the road gave them the advantage of not having to contend with the dust problem. Behind them, the hugely experienced Hannes Grobler was content to take up a watching brief in what was going to be a cat and mouse game. It was left to Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans in the 3rd factory Nissan Navara to provide for some early action when they missed a triple caution instruction and almost came to grief.
How that Nissan Navara stayed on all 4 wheels is a mystery. Tollefson later referred to the big moment, which is Norwegian for understatement.
Privateers Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst were being a little more circumspect in a Toyota Hilux, looking a bit shy on sponsored decals. Visser and Badenhorst joined the RFS fold too late to send the vehicle for a paint job, but were quietly going about laying the foundation for a good run. It was much the same story for the Sulvolts, who were setting the early pace in the special vehicle category. Jimmy Zahus and Stefan Coetzee were in a hot pursuit of the Sulvolts, with the Atlas Copco Porter 6-litre Chevy motor sounding glorious. Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman were also in the thick of a battle that had huge potential, although dust was starting to become a problem.
Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau were on a charge in the Total Porter, with sections of the route opening up for the speed merchants. Limpopo crew Naeem Musaji and Mohammed Mulston in the Jimco were gaining in confidence and putting behind them the trauma of their 2008 crash, while the Regent racing pair of Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson were steadiness personified.
With Don Thompson and Don Blakey picking up an early puncture, with the Besaidnout brothers Johan and Etienne were out in front in Class B and looking more than comfortable. Behind them, Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton were intent on a finish in the points and were not taking any undue chances in the factory Castrol Toyota Hilux. After a disappointing prologue, Nick and Ryan Harper and the Atlas Copco Bat were trying to make up ground, but were being hampered by dust. The dust was always going to be a factor and made for dodgy visibility and even dodgier overtaking when the opportunity presented itself. Behind the Harper car, Nandus Alberts and Audrey Roots were also battling the dust, but for them, it was a case of so far, so good.
Off-road crews operate out of one of the smallest, noisiest and uncomfortable offices to be found anywhere. After years of driving a special vehicle, Terence Marsh, who once played professional cricket for a living, was having to adapt to driving an SP-class car, and the rough route was making a tough job even tougher. Tight sections of track were interspersed with faster sections of road, and Chris de Plooy Sr. and Ewald van Rensburg were pushing hard in the RFS Toyota Hilux. The Pretoria crew were being chased by veteran former SA champions Richard Schilling and Chris Davies in their Cultura Esco, with the crew looking to put a disappointing 2008 season behind them.
Making a welcome return to action, Will Battershill and Reg Sutton were going along steadily and easing themselves back into the rigours of off-road racing. Their race was to end 130 kilometres into the first loop when they hit a rock and lost the right front wheel. Behind Battershill and Sutton on the road, Don Thompson and Don Blakey and Azarko were on a mission to make up time. Their target was Johan and Etienne Besaidnout, who had taken a tight grip on Class P in the Adenco Bat and were making a statement for the sponsors of the race.
The Rubicon racing pair of Pieter Ruthven and Deval Boshoff were having navigation problems on a route that provided co-drivers with a few headaches. They were forced to retire when they broke a front control arm in a disappointing end for their SP-class debut.
With the retirement after the prologue of Kutsia Labaskachny and Johan Gerber in the Raysonics Nissan Hardbody, the Class D battle was being dominated by Cliff and Louis Weichelt in the N1 4x4 Toyota Hilux, with a pair reveling in the conditions. Dion Venter and Ian Palmer were setting the pace in Class E in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. They were being chased by the Ferodo Nissan Hardbody of LEEROY POULTER and Rob Howie, with a terrific battle starting to develop between the two crews. Dewald van Breda and Johan de Tooy had fallen off the Class D pace, but were battling with an overheating problem, with the engine fan catching against the radiator.
A prologue fraught with problems saw Herman Sulwald and his son Wichard starting the race at the back of the field, and they were finding it heavy going. Although Sulwald complained that the dust was making it hard to see, let alone think of attacking a car in front, they were having fun and pushing to make up time.
An impressive debut for Pikkie Labaskachny and Rikus Erasmus in the second 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux was to end in retirement, but Louw de Bruin and Rian Greyling in their first outing in the ex-Peckham factory Ford Ranger were settling in nicely.
After their prologue woes, Hein Lateghan and Chris Birkin were trying to make up time in the second Castrol Toyota Hilux, but at times visibility was so bad they were forced to grind to a halt.
For Lateghan, it was a tough introduction to off-road racing, and his day was not going to get much easier. It was also hard going for the Unifreight Ford Ranger pair of Kobus van Tonde and Rian Kwalpe, who were also fighting to make up for lost ground after prologue problems. They were being chased by Simon Beckett and Steve Harris in the Century Racing Bat, who were leading the Class B runners. The Macanete brothers had sorted out the fuel pump problem that forced them out of the prologue and were making good time. Behind the Macanetes, John Telford and Christo Forskenk were going steadily in the Calcimite car, while Bez and Dion Besaidnout had run into electrical problems in the Adenco Bat.
The Dan Swanepoel Keith Solomon IDM Cement Toyota Hilux was carrying the scars of its gentle prologue roll, but matters weren't improving for the crew. They ran into one problem after another, and when they switched on the lights and the windscreen wipers came on, it was time to call it a day. Behind them, Bapi RUBULUZA and Kulile Vakalisa were looking strong after being helped out of thick sand by Louw de Bruin and Rian Greyling.
Reigning Class E champions Jannie Visser and Yorks Leroux in the RFS Toyota Hilux were also playing catch-up after prologue woes, but were going well. They were making up wads of time and were being chased by brothers Diedrich and Donnie Hutting in the Transcore Toyota Hilux, who were forced out of the prologue with a broken fan belt. They were still battling overheating, while Johan Fouché and Wenzel Pretorius were staging a brave Class D fightback after clutch problems in the lone Mitsubishi Colt in the field.
Any expectations Bez and Dion Besaidnout held at the start of the event quickly took a knock. The Adenco bat was hampered by a misfire on the prologue, and this developed into a full-scale electrical problem. By the time they got everything sorted out, they were heavily committed to playing a catch-up game.
Straight, and now hairpin left, off to this bush. Hairpin left. Towards the quarry.
At the sharp end of the field, Duncan Voss and Ralph Pitchford were hard at work in the Donaldson Nissan Navara. They were controlling the race from the front and have gelled into a formidable combination. Voss is a former circuit racing champion who took to the off-road like a duck to water and swears Pitchford is the best co-driver in the world. And after Pitchford's Dakar Rally triumph, there are many who would agree with him. With Pitchford sitting alongside him, Voss is always fast, smooth and confident, and it's so far not put a wheel wrong.
The lead pair were just shy of 40 seconds ahead of Hannes Grobler and Juan Moore in the second of the three Donaldson Nissan Navara factory entries that were dominating the race. Grobler's tactics were obviously to apply as much pressure as possible to try and force a mistake from the leaders. Grobler and Moore had a slight gap over Tollefson and Evans, with their Navara showing distinct signs of wear and tear. Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst were a solid fourth in the RFS Toyota Hilux, but lost a few seconds with a little turning circle problem at a road crossing.
Locals were out in force and thoroughly enjoying themselves. Also enjoying themselves at the front of the special vehicle field were Cully and Quinton Solvalt. The Solvalt racing bat was sounding strong, and the pair had eked out a comfortable lead over Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman, who were having an impressive first outing in the new Motorite Revo 1 4x4. Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson had moved the Regent racing bat into third place, but were under attack from Naeem Mossaji and Mohammed Molson, who were having a great run. Also having a great run and putting pressure on the Class A cars were Johan and Etienne Besaidnout, who were leading Class P by the proverbial mile.
Also moving up through the field were Nick and Ryan Harper in the Atlas Copco bat. The car was also sounding strong, with the father and son crew working well together on a race where navigation was often tricky. There was still no heroics from Anthony Taylor and Robert Houtman in the Castrol Toyota Hilux, who were rounding out the top 5 among the production vehicles, with the Toyota also sounding good. For Terence Marsh and Pieter Groenewald, the learning curve was continuing, with the pair starting to come to terms with the ex-Voss Nissan Navara.
The Class E lead was still in the hands of Dion Venter and Ian Palmer in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux, with the pair looking for their second national win. The Toyota crew was still being chased by debutant LEEROY POULTER and Rob Howie in the Ferodo Nissan Hardbody in a scrap that held plenty of potential. Cliff and Louis Weichelt were having a clean run and dominating Class D, with Simon Beckett and Steve Harris still in charge of Class B in the Century Racing bat.
For Bapi RUBULUZA, it was the end of the road.
No, we were running well, very well in fact, and I think we had some electronics problem. So the engine will only just crank and it's not firing. So we thought maybe to save it, we would rather not fiddle much with the engine management system.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going the extra mile to get you financed.
Supersport's Blitz channel keeps you in the know and updated with all the sporting action you've missed. All your favorite sports. All the scores. All the sports news all the time. Watch your world of sport. The Supersport Blitz channel, exclusive to your World of Champions, Supersport. Proudly sponsored by OUTsurance. Call us direct on 08600 60,000.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going off the beaten track to find solutions.
The first car into the pits at the designated service park was the Foss Pitchford Donaldson Nissan Navara. Right on their heels were Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore, with the veteran Grobler showing all the signs of a tough morning.
Hannes, how's it been out there?
It's quite tough. It's very, very tight, so you work all the time. And the dust was really, really bad. We battled in the dust, you know, it opens and it closes. So when the wind is coming towards you, you can't see nothing. So we fell back for a minute and then we're catching up. So it's going all the way. I don't think it's going to be easy to pass. So yeah, we'll see.
There was a hive of activity around the RFS Toyota Hilux of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst, with Badenhorst happy with the progress thus far.
It's going well. We're lying fourth at the moment, and a little bit in Ivor's dust for the last few 10 or so Ks, but everything's fine. The exhaust came loose, so we're losing a bit of power, but I think the guys are fixing it, so hopefully we'll get it right.
A gearbox problem slowed the Solvots over the last 50 kilometers before the DSP, but the special vehicle category leaders were still upbeat.
The route's fantastic. We've enjoyed it a lot. We've had a slight gearbox problem the last 50k, so we've lost we slowed down. So we noticed that, yeah, we're going to fix it now. Lost about a minute, but otherwise it's going very well. The car's perfect.
The new Motorite Revo 1 4x4 had moved into an impressive second place among the special vehicles, with Evan Hutchinson having fun.
The car's holding out good, running a little bit hot on the front diff, so we're keeping an eye on that, trying to take it easy. But having fun, yeah, getting used to driving the four-wheel drive.
There were no dramas in the tyre rack camp, with Naim Musaji opting for a change of rubber on the Jimco.
We've tried new tires. I think they might have a bit too much grip. I want to try something that allows it to, you know, slide or spin a bit more. So I don't know. Hopefully it works.
There were also no dramas for Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton, with the Castrol Toyota Cruise sticking to the plan for the top 5 finish.
Yeah, the first 60 Ks where the prologue was is actually quite rough. But then it seems to open up a little bit and then it gets a bit tight again. So yeah, generally it's actually quite a good event.
If anyone was in doubt about the severity of the route, all they had to do was have a chat with Terence Marsh.
Yeah, we're starting to feel a lot more comfortable, but it's a lot difficult. I mean, we're still really trying to understand and learn the car. But I can comfortably tell you that was the hardest loop I've done for quite some time.
After a ragged start to the race, Class B contenders Don Thompson and Don Blakey had the Besadenhout brothers in their sights.
It's been good. Very unfortunate that the first 10 Ks we had a puncture, a bit of bum driving. And then, yeah, we were going like a rocket and passed a couple of oaks, and then there's one road crossing, we got stuck in the gate in the sand there, so we toiled to get out of there. So we had to catch another couple of oaks and pass it.
Class E leaders Dion Fenter and Ian Palmer were happy with progress, but keeping an eye on the POULTER HOWIE Nissan Hardbody.
So far so good, very rough, but so far we're keeping it together. I think the Nissan's about 2 or 3 minutes behind us.
Also happy with progress was Kobus van Tonder, with no repeat of the problems that plagued the Unifreight Ford Ranger in the prologue.
It went quite much better today than yesterday. It's still very rust and dust is quite an effect. So you battle to get past cars in ahead of you. But apart from that, we went very well. We had quite a smooth run, no problem.
At the end of the first loop, Duncan Voss and Ralph Pitchford led the production vehicles by just 24 seconds from Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore. The Class E and Class D leaders were the only non-SP class runners in the top 10.
The DSP saw a major retirement, with the Variawa Rousseau Porter out with sideshaft problems.
After Loop 1, the Solvots comfortably led the special vehicles ahead of the impressive Motorite Revo 1, with the Besadenhout brothers right up there with the leaders in the Class P entry.
It had turned into a glorious day in the Western Cape, and the large crowds of enthusiasts were gathering at the various spectator points. The prospect was for some hard racing on the second loop, particularly in the production vehicle class. Here, just a minute separated the Donaldson Nissan Navaras of Foss Pitchford and Grobler Moore. For Foss and Pitchford, the name of the game was to keep it smooth and not make any mistakes on a route that would severely punish errors of judgment.
Okay, double caution, yeah.
Teamwork and complete trust in each other's ability are critical elements for a successful partnership between driver and co-driver. Where Foss and Pitchford are concerned, there's an abundance of both.
With no dust factor to hamper their progress, Foss and Pitchford were able to control the pace. In dusty conditions, catching the car ahead is one thing. Getting past is another matter. Chasing after his teammates, the vastly experienced Hannes Grobler knew that his best chance of sneaking the win would be to pressurize Foss and Pitchford into a mistake. That would be no easy task, but for off-road racers, hope springs eternal.
The SP class vehicles are nothing less than hugely expensive and highly sophisticated purpose-built race cars that are based on a production body. Powered by engines of up to 4 litres, the cars are able to stretch their legs on sections of the route that opened up and at full stretch are a very impressive sight.
The Donaldson Nissan team was still holding on to the first 3 places in the production vehicle category. The Ivar Tollefson Quinn Evans vehicle was looking a little worse for wear, but the Dakar Rally heroes were running strongly. Now into their 3rd season of racing in the ABSA series, Tollefson and Quinn are regarded by the off-road fraternity as honorary South Africans. Tollefson and Quinn enjoy the more technical routes, but were having trouble shaking off the attentions of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst in the RFS Toyota Hilux.
Visser and Badenhorst are former Class D champions and since moving into the SP class have turned in some sterling performances and are among the most consistent runners in the Premier category.
At the front of the special vehicle field, South African champions Kali Sulwalt and San Quinton were still in command and looked to have the race in their pockets. Like so many other teams, the Sulwalts have turned off-road racing into a family enterprise. A decade ago, Kali won his first championship co-driving for brother Herman. Now, both Kali and Herman have their sons co-driving for them, with an entourage of other family members there to cheer them on and help with catering and servicing of vehicles on events.
The cockpit of a special vehicle is not the most comfortable place on Earth, but the space frame cars suck up punishment dished out on even the roughest conditions. Cars can utilize 2-litre, 4-litre or unlimited capacity engines with weight restrictions corresponding to engine capacity.
Space frame cars are allowed to make use of 4-wheel drive, and Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman were having a great debut in the Motorite Revo 1 4x4, designed and built by Bergman. The crew were hoping to put behind them a disappointing 2008 and had their hopes pinned on the new car. Chasing after the Motorite entry were Naeem Moussajin and Mohammed Moulston in the Tyre Rack Jimco, who slotted into 3rd place. A touch of irony was provided in that on last year's event, Hutchinson Bergman and Moussajin Moulston were involved in a huge accident.
Almost unobtrusively, brothers Johan and Etienne Besaidnout had moved into the top 5 in the Adenco BAT. They were in complete control of Class P and were running with the leading Class A cars.
In tight conditions, it was no major surprise to see a Class P car harrying the Class A runners. Introduced at the beginning of the 2008 season, Class P is in fact a sort of budget Class A. Cars are fitted with 6-cylinder engines, restricted in size to 4 litres, and are quick and nimble.
Also going along steadily were Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson in the Regent Racing BAT. They'd maintained a steady pace throughout the race, but were being chased down by Nick and Ryan Harper in the Atlas Copco BAT. Teammates Jimmy Zahus and Stefan Kutsia had fallen by the wayside, with the Harpers playing a lone hand up front for the Atlas Copco squad.
Behind the three Donaldson Nissans and the RFS Toyota, the Castrol Toyota factory pair of Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton were holding down a solid 5th overall in the production vehicle category. It was Taylor's first taste of the Adenco 400, and the game plan was still centered around a solid finish. Holding station behind them were Terence Marsh and Pieter GROENEWALD in the Regent Racing Nissan Navara. Marsh has plenty of Adenco 400 experience, and he and GROENEWALD won the special vehicle category last year. Now out in an SP class vehicle, the pair look to be making the transition without undue problems.
Also racing an SP class vehicle for the first time were Christian de Plooy and Henk Janssen van Vieren, who were out in one of 3 RFS Toyota Hilux entries in the Premier category. The pair last year campaigned in Class D and were going about putting together a solid debut race. There was disappointment for the team when Chris de Plooy and Ewald van Rensburg crashed out of the event and ended up in hospital with back injuries.
Further back down the field, Herman and Wichard Solwald were trying to make up time, but were headed for later retirement. Things were going a lot better for Cliff and Louis Weichelt, who were going steadily in the N1 4x4 Toyota Hilux D4D and had a tight hold on Class D. The Class E lead was still held by Dion Venter and Ian Palmer in the 4x4 Megaworld Toyota Hilux, but they were not having an easy time of it and were beset by a string of suspension and tyre problems. A plus for the Megaworld pair was that they'd shaken off the attentions of LEEROY POULTER and Rob HOWIE, with the Ferodo Nissan retiring with a damaged engine.
The regulations for Class D and E runners are pretty much the same, with engine capacity the major difference. Both categories cater for production-based trucks with petrol or diesel engines limited to 3.5 litres. Engines in Class D are 6-cylinder units, while in Class E engines are restricted to 4. Both categories allow 2- or 4-wheel drive, and the regulations make for close racing with entries from Nissan, Toyota, Ford and Mitsubishi.
Still making up time after their disappointing performance on the prologue were Kobus van Tonde and Rian Guelpe in the Unifreight Ford Ranger. A poor showing on the prologue immediately puts teams on the back foot, and in these situations, the best crews can hope for is to salvage as many points as possible. The race was proving to be a lot more comfortable than the prologue, with the Harry Smith-based crew going along strongly in an X-Works Ford Ranger that is starting to get a little long in the tooth.
Also soldiering along were Hein Latergan and Chris Birkin in the second factory Castrol Toyota. The engine sensor trouble that ruined their prologue had been cured, but the race brought fresh problems, including overheating and a puncture. It was important, though, for Latergan, and late replacement in the Castrol Toyota team from Mark Grenier, to get as much seat time in the vehicle as possible. A former circuit racer who also rallies on the national circuit, Latergan has a strong technical background and looks to be a solid replacement for Grenier, who's taking a sabbatical from off-road racing.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, overcoming all obstacles.
Mother Nature's tried just about everything, but Bear Grylls just keeps coming back for more. So this time, let's just say the gloves are coming off. A brand new series of Ultimate Survival, Monday at 9 on Discovery. DSTV, so much more.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going off the beaten track to find solutions.
Coming up is a graphic illustration of just how difficult passing can be when the route is tight and the dust is a major factor. Coming down the hill in the bakkie are reigning Class E champions Jannie Visser and Joks Leroux, who are intent on salvaging points after prologue problems. Behind them are the Class B leaders, with Des and Dion Besadenhout in the Adenco Bat, managing to get past the RFS Toyota Hilux. Not so lucky are Simon Beckett and Steve Harris in the Century Racing Bat. Despite staying off the track, Beckett and Harris cannot find a way past the Toyota.
The Class B battle is the tightest in the race, but getting past the Toyota has given the Besaidnoids breathing space. Beckett and Harris are stuck in the dust behind the Toyota, and it's going to need some cooperation from Visser and LEEROY for the Century back to get past and recover lost ground.
When the opportunity finally presents itself, Visser and LEEROY move out of the way to allow the bat to go past, but the damage has been done.
Free State-based Low De Bruin last year won the Class B Drivers' Championship and is another of the string of competitors now out in production cars. De Bruin and Rian Kreiling were a long way behind the class leaders Dion Venter and Ian Palmer, but were going along steadily in the Rubicon Ford Ranger. Also a long way in arrears were Debord van Breda and Johan de Tooy in the Northern Toyota Hilux. They were still plagued by overheating problems and had lost touch with Class D leaders Cliff and Louis Weichelt, who were having a trouble-free run. For the Class D and E runners, it was tough going.
For the Atlas Copco pair of Gary Gillingham and Dani Stassen, problems started early. They burnt the bat's clutch offloading the car in the pits and made an abortive attempt to complete the prologue. They had to fly in spare parts from Johannesburg overnight, and after frantic work on the car, made it to the start. Perseverance had paid off, and a steady drive and retirements had seen them into the top fringes of Class A, with the car sounding in good shape.
Also restored to good shape were Bez and Dion Besaidnout, who had sorted out their electrical problems and were challenging in Class B in the Adenco Bat. They were making up time on Simon Beckett and Steve Harris, and with Johan and Etienne Besaidnout leading Class P, things were looking up for the Besaidnout family and, of course, Adenco.
At the back of the field, it had been hard going for Johan Fischer and Wenzel Pretorius in the lone Mitsubishi Colt running in Class D. They were plagued with a clutch problem, but were plugging determinedly on around 2 hours behind class leaders Cliff and Louis Weichelt. Caught in the Mitsubishi's dust were Marius Nicholson and Roderick Jeffrey in a sandbaster that was destined to be a late casualty.
It was thirsty work for the professional and amateur photographers, and being under a shady tree with plenty of refreshment was the perfect place for watching all the action. It was a lot hotter in the cars, with Derek de Tooy and Ian Pienaar putting in a late spurt in the orange tree back that was to take them into a podium finish in Class B.
There was also a late flourish from Hicho and Jaap de Bruin, who were putting in a spirited finish in the Micron XL Toyota Hilux. A string of problems in the prologue and during the race saw to it that the de Bruins were always playing catch-up. It was a weekend they would rather forget, but there was compensation by the way of 10th place in the SP class.
Perseverance also paid off for the Macanetti brothers in the Zarco. Despite a recurrence of the fuel pump problems that plagued them on the prologue, they brought the Zarco home in one piece and were fourth in class after a very brave effort.
Back at the finish at the Darling Country Club, Duncan Force and Rolf Pitchford led home a Donaldson Nissan 1-2 triumph. Force and Pitchford never put a wheel wrong on an ultra-tough route and were just 41 seconds ahead of Hannes Grobler and Juan Moore in what was a perfect start to the season for the Midrand-based team.
Yeah, couldn't have gone better. You know, we had a great time trial. We didn't get caught in anyone's dust. We started right in the front, and yeah, it was a great way to start the season. No trouble whatsoever.
So the car went like clockwork.
No, it was perfect. When we got into the pits on the first loop, it wouldn't start, so they found a problem, but thank God we found it in the pits. But other than that, it was just a perfect weekend.
Yeah, no, it was a great race. We enjoyed it thoroughly. But was very rough. Yes, unbelievable. I must say the second loop was much better than the first. Because I think the track was a little bit open and that, I must say we can't complain. We had a small problem with exhaust today, exhaust system, the first loop and the second loop. So we lost a little bit of power near to the end, but other than that, we
Evan, you couldn't have wished for a better start. New season, new car, win first time out. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, it's been a fantastic day. I can't believe it. Thanks to Motorite, thanks to Achim who built the car, thanks to my crew. Yeah, an incredible day. You know, we had a few problems. A few people in front of us and they fell by the wayside. Sibble's maybe 3 or 4 kilometers back here broken down and we couldn't believe it when we saw him. I don't know what the problem was, but you know, last year we had it was disastrous. You know, we lost our car and it was a very bad start to the year. So, but we kept at it. You know, we never gave up. We built a new car and we came here hoping and praying that we could get back on top again, and we did it.
Yeah, no, our game plan today was, as I told you earlier on, we're just going to take it easy and go for it. And you know, we pulled up to third in the DSP. After that came out, and we went about 50, 100 kilos, and then we picked up second position, and then we maintained right until the end, basically. The car still clutch was slipping, so we were just nursing it home, and a good result at the end.
It was excellent, I must be honest. You know, I came here with the intention just of finishing and collecting points, and that's exactly what we achieved, you know. So at least now we look forward to Port Elizabeth, and I'm going to pretty much take the same approach down there because I've never been there. But yeah, you know, it's first time for me here, so next time when I come back I can at least trace a bit harder.
We had a clean run, we had any punches. I think in the second loop we got used to the car, we were a bit better. Peter had a great in the co-driver's seat today, he really was good. Yeah, I can't ask for a better result on debut, without a doubt, but it was difficult, it was hard.
Yeah, we're very glad. We had a nice day. It was fast. The terrain is excellent, Mark. Very well done.
The production vehicle class was dominated by the 2 leading Donaldson Nissan Navaras with good results for Visser and Baardhorst, Taylor and Houghton and Marsh and GROENEWALD. Class D was dominated by the Weichhards and Class E by Venter and Palmer, with both teams grabbing top 10 finishes.
A dream win for Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bachmann in the special vehicle category in the Motorite Revo 1. The Adenco Cup overflowed with the Besaidnout brothers winning Class B and Bez and Dion Besaidnout Class B.
Don't miss the action from the Eastern Cape 400 in Jeffreys Bay on Friday and Saturday the 17th and 18th of April. We'll see you there.
That was the ultimate test. The ABSA off-road through the race.